Oh my goodness. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is for you. I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Zach Schomler. This is Strong Opinion Sports, episode 693. And joining me is my co host, Nathan. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. For now on, if you could call me stepfather, that would be fantastic.
Oh, is there context to that? I don't really know what.
I'm not. I'm not sure if you saw a commenter. Somebody on the last video said, "You know what? Nathan's like that stepfather that you didn't really like or you didn't want, but then you just grow to absolutely love him." I'm like, you know what? I'll take that.
That's not
It's,
bad.
it's right. It was a new voice coming into your channel, and I'm grateful that a few people have given me a chance and continue to tune in and appreciate what I bring to the show. So, yeah, I'm the stepfather of the show, I guess.
I'm not calling you daddy, though. I don't know if we've
Please
covered.
don't. Please don't.
I gotta say, I'm sorry to start the show this way. I've never got that. I never understood. I don't like. It's weird that people want to be called that in certain contexts, and I'm like, I just don't. I never thought that was awesome. Never thought that was cool.
You don't like being called papa?
No, no. I could do poppy, but I would still think about it too much. I couldn't
Big
enjoy
papi.
myself. I would be in
Hola,
my
big
head.
papi.
Yeah, the whole daddy thing. I never got it. I just don't. It just goes right over my head. I don't really like it. I've had to stop interactions before. Not again. I know, a terrible way to start a sports podcast, but I've had to be like, whoa, don't call me that, or else I'm gonna leave, and like we can't do this. Like for real.
It's gonna hit you just right one time, and it's
uh,
gonna change your life.
yeah. But not the way you think. I'm gonna have a daughter, and I'm gonna love her very much. And she's gonna call me daddy, and I'm gonna buy her Christmas presents. You know what I mean? Like that's how the context. So I'd
Right.
never. You can't turn that into a sexual thing. I just can't. I
Right, but
can't.
then your wife's gonna start saying, "Hey, like, come on, go talk to daddy, go see what daddy has to say." You know what I mean? And
I
then
guess.
I'm telling
But
you,
again,
what?
I don't
All
know how
right,
you turn that
okay,
into like a romantic setting.
we don't need to labor on this topic. We don't.
Oh man. What a weekend of football, man! It was really it was surprising. I thought there were a couple things that happened. I think actually weird. I know of all the surprises this weekend,
Hmm.
one of them was that the Rams kept up with Philly fairly well. Like that game came down to the final drive. Didn't see that coming. I did expect Saquon to go off. He had a crazy game. He had a ton of
Yep.
yards, multiple touchdowns. I didn't think that game was going to come down to, hey, it's the Rams ball, 2 minutes left. They got a chance to put together a drive. They did not. They had that big sack on third down. But
Yep.
were you equally surprised the Rams actually fairly well hung in the game with Philly?
I was very surprised. If you look at a box score and you see a running back go for 205 yards, typically that means the team that's trailing is not close. But I think that what we're kind of overlooking in this is just the weather. It was a really tough environment to play in, and I'm honestly shocked that Stafford threw for over 300 yards. They threw the ball 44 times, and Kyron still had over 100 yards rushing. I think that tells you about the kind of pass rush that the Eagles had, right? Stafford had to get the ball out of his hands. And in the moments where he just needed a second longer, he didn't have it. And I think that ended up being the difference in the game. Obviously the turnovers that were created, the fumble by Kyron, the fumble by Matt Stafford, and that ultimately was the difference. Saquon being a game changer, and then the Rams not making the biggest plays. They didn't make. I mean, think about the big plays from that game. All of them are from Philly, whether that's Jalen Hurts or whether that's Saquon Barkley. There's very few plays that you can point to from the Rams that were like, that could have changed the course of this game from that offensive perspective.
Yeah, I think about the future of the Rams and the way things have changed. I thought they had a couple, I would call them miscues on the offensive line. Their center missed a couple assignments that led to sacks and problems for Matthew Stafford. But ultimately, like the future of the Rams is pretty bright. This is a team that was a drive away from the NFC title game, honestly. And I think they would have played an interesting game against Washington. Like there's a reality here, a timeline where they end up in a Super Bowl. And that's not at all what I expected from them going into the year. And it just a huge, it's a season of almost overachievement for the Rams, and one that they can build off, I think, in the future.
I don't want to quite say it was an overachievement for the Rams. I think that when we were talking in the preseason, and maybe for me here, I really liked this team and thought they had the potential to win the division and potentially unseat the Niners. I thought the Niners were probably going to win, but we saw how that fell apart. Yeah. Those injuries that the Rams had to weather early I think kind of changed everybody's expectations, and we
Mm.
acknowledge that. And then they got healthy. And then all of a sudden, this team really started to come together late in the season. But yeah, I think they're probably just a year or two away. And I don't know how much more time Matt Stafford has, but they just weren't a complete enough team to really challenge and beat Philly. And obviously, they did challenge them in a way, but at no point did I feel like Philly was in danger of losing that football game. They were physically outmatching them.
Yeah. At what point do the Rams need to start thinking about a future without Matthew Stafford? Like, should they be drafting this year? Should they be preparing for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think they were trying to do that this year, right? There was conversation of Matt Stafford being traded to the Vikings. Um, I'm sorry, my cats are having a rumble tumble showdown right now. This is hilarious. It's off
Rumble
screen.
in the San Francisco jungle over there.
But they tried to move off of, or there was rumored that they were moving off him this year. They took a flyer and drafted Stetson Bennett, who had a lot of starts at Georgia, maybe to be that succession guy. So I think that McVay has been thinking about it. It just hasn't really materialized and worked out. And honestly, Stafford kind of had a resurgence this year a little bit, not playing great all the time, but playing great in spots, which validates why he's on that football team.
Yeah. Jalen Hurts against the Rams, 15 for 20, 128 yards, got sacked 7 times. Had a touchdown on the ground, I guess, ran for 70 yards. Like, this was a typical Jalen Hurts, efficient, grinded out game. Now, context matters. They're playing in the snow. I understand that. But his counterpart, the opposition, threw for over 300 yards. I maintain the conversation that, hey, Jalen Hurts, I'm not sure when he's needed to throw for 400 yards, he can and he will. And that impending moment is probably a Super Bowl against Josh Allen or Kansas City, honestly. I think even more so against Kansas City. Like, can he go toe to toe with Patrick Mahomes and win the Super Bowl? I don't know. And honestly, a weird thing to say this, but I think Jayden Daniels could really give us he could challenge a Mahomes with his arms, with his legs. Jalen Hurts isn't as dynamic of a runner, isn't as good of a thrower of the football. He's on a loaded football team, but I don't know. Like, is he ever going to be a limiting factor for this team? It's just a hanging chad for me. I'm not sure. It's a question to me. Is Jalen Hurts the limiting factor for this football team?
Man, that is a tough question because you think about his performance in the Super Bowl just 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, wow, where did that Jalen go? And perhaps that shoulder injury is worse than we let on. And he kind of got, not the Cam Newton treatment, but it was sort of Cam Newton had that shoulder injury after he took that shot. And he was just never quite the same throwing the football mechanically. And I wonder if a little bit of that has eked into Jalen. But then also, he's coming off a concussion still.
Yeah.
Right. And I know that he had played last week as well, but he was teetering passing concussion protocol. And we may or may not be able to say, hey, he probably wasn't ready, but it was forced through for the sake of the NFL.
Yeah.
Maybe he's still dealing with that, add in the conditions, and that would look like, what he produced. He's dropping back, taking 7 sacks. For a guy who's that physical with his legs, it's hard to see him take 7 sacks because he is so mobile. So maybe something still isn't clicking upright or up top in his head right now.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair to hold the Rams game against him, right? You're playing in the snow, you're 15 for 20, you're efficient, you take care of the football. Like, I'm not going to criticize him for that stat line, right?
And he had the opening touchdown as well. He did
Yeah.
change the game with his legs.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just, I guess, asking the question: is there going to be a point where his ability to throw the football becomes a problem? I don't know, and I'm not 100% confident. Which is, there's not much to that. I'm not really criticizing the guy. I'm just saying, like, hey, I think there still is more to be proven from Jalen Hurts, and I'm curious what happens down the road for Philly.
Yeah, and in the event that they get past Washington this next week, they're going to be in the Superdome or the Caesars Sportsbook Dome. I don't even know what it's called
Whatever
now.
it is, inside.
Yeah, it's going to be inside, and I guarantee he's going to have to put up some points. And even this next week, Jayden Daniels has proven that even in some cold weather for him, I'm sorry, not cold weather, that he can score with the best of the best. He kept up with the Lions. He beat the Lions, and you're going to need to see Jalen Hurts have a better offensive performance.
Let's talk about that game. The Washington Commanders beat the Lions 45-31. There's a lot to be said here. There's a lot of things we could talk about. I think one of them, though, is the obvious thought that, hey, Washington with a new owner, totally different franchise. I know that's like, we can talk about Jayden Daniels, we can talk about the coach, we can talk about all this stuff, but the truth is, I work for a small business, which I think is actually more akin to what an NFL franchise is. When you've got a different owner at the top setting the tempo and changing the culture of an organization, it's crazy how quickly things can have different results. I mean, I thought Washington was going to figure it out with a new owner. Didn't realize it was going to happen this quickly. Now, some of that's you hire the right coach, you find the right quarterback, you get Cliff Kingsbury. All these things had to happen. But I think the owner deserves credit too, and it's really interesting to see how quickly. I mean, a couple of years ago, Washington was the worst place to play in the NFL. No one wanted to be in that
Bottom of the
building.
barrel.
And now they're a culture that looks like a fun place to be. They're winning. They're doing well. They just knocked off the Lions. I think that deserves a lot of respect.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And a lot of things went right for them this year just to get to the playoffs and then to have earned your way there, scrapping, clawing, they're a Hail Mary away from losing to the Bears. They barely beat the Giants early in the season. And really, some of those bigger teams that they had played earlier in the season, they didn't really have a lot of success, right? They got beat by Baltimore, they got beat by Pittsburgh, they got beat by Philly. So to see the way this team has come together and fed off of each other, picked each other up when each other's down, offense to defense, has been incredibly impressive. And like you said, the owner sets the tone from the top down. And to get Jayden Daniels, a guy who's experienced out of college, to have him playing at this high of a level, to have Cliff Kingsbury getting that offense dialed in and bringing out wrinkles, quite frankly, that he hadn't all season, that was also extremely impressive. Aaron Glenn was guessing all night on defense. And when that Lions defense has to play, a true defensive base set, and they can't just let the pass rushers go loose, then you're starting to see some of those holes that they had on the back end and in their linebacking core.
Don't miss out on the last football game of the year with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the big game. Prize Picks is also giving away a free pick for the big game where one of the starting quarterbacks will only need to throw for 1 yard to win. If you're correct on at least one more stat projection, you can win real cash. Check out the promos tab to tail any of our Super Sweat Millie Winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. I guess one more time, tip of the cap to Josh Harris, the Washington Commanders owner. He's awesome. Jayden Daniels is a superstar, man. We had a debate about Justin Herbert last week on the show, right? Is he elite? Is he not? I'd take Jayden Daniels over Herbert all day, no questions asked. I mean, he's I think a game changer using his legs. He can turn a sack into a huge gain. He's one of the most dynamic people. Him and Lamar are the two most dynamic quarterbacks running the football in the NFL. And then I think he's got an incredible arm, a better arm than a Jalen Hurts. I wonder at times, has he got a better ball down the sidelines than Lamar Jackson? Like, he can do everything you possibly want, and he's a great leader, and people love him. He makes big plays in big moments. Like, I can't think of a single criticism of Jayden Daniels, and it's just it's cool to see him have so much success so early. I did not think at all the season was going to come to an end in Detroit for the Lions this past weekend, and I was shocked. I was like, oh my gosh, the Lions 2020 season's over, like, or 2024 year is over. Like, I just did not expect this at all. And it's really cool because I think now we get an NFC title game between two teams from the East, Philly and Washington. They already played each other twice this year. And it's a really, really interesting matchup. What do you say about all that? Because, I mean, literally, actually, the last two times these two teams played each other, 36-33. And so they're 1-1 against each other. One time Washington won, one time Philly won. Washington beat them without
Most
a
recently, I
healthy.
believe.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, man. What do you make of this matchup coming up, and how excited are you for Washington in general?
I'm extremely excited for Washington, particularly the way they were able to efficiently run the football with Brian Robinson. I think that made a massive difference. As soon as it didn't have to be all on Jayden Daniels' shoulders, that was game changing, I think, for him. You talked about the deep ball that he has. It's hard to argue anybody's throwing a better deep ball than him right now. I mean, I know you can point to a number of guys if you really truly wanted to, but the ball that he threw to De'Ami Brown while he was getting smacked in the face dropped in the bucket. The deep ball to Terry McLaurin dropped in a bucket. And we saw that throughout the year, right? Whenever they needed a big play, they made it happen. And that's been the biggest difference, I think. And what makes championship caliber teams is when you need the play, can you make it? And they haven't just made the play, they've made spectacular plays, right? They didn't just get 11 yards on third down. They're getting an 80-yard bomb on third down. And that is so electric and electrifying for your team. Keeps you playing with momentum and playing confident. So now you go to Philly, you've already beat these dudes this year, right? It's not scary to go into Lincoln Financial. You know what you have to do. You know what it's going to take. You're going to have to slug it out. And honestly, more pressure is going to be on the Eagles. The Eagles are quote unquote supposed to be here, right? The Commanders are playing with house money.
Hmm.
They were maybe supposed to make the playoffs in the wild card, maybe not. They weren't going to be that great, a lot of change, but here they are. They got house money. There is no pressure on them. And so I think it's going to be an interesting matchup. And, weather dependent, you're going to have to score 25 plus points to win this game.
I would also say I think there's a huge parallel between what Philly does and what Washington does. I mean, they got guys who can beat you over the top down the sideline. They run the ball well, and they really challenge you. If you put numbers in the box, they're going to take it over the top. If you back off, they're going to run the ball. I mean, it's very similar, the approach Philly has and Washington has. I think Philly's got probably better receivers and a better running back. I would say that Washington's got a better quarterback throwing the football down the sideline and a better quarterback at making a play on third and short or whatever to get a huge run to extend the drive. But the way that these two teams approach and attack NFL defense is actually very, very similar. They just toy with you and play with numbers in the box and challenge you a lot. I think it's a great matchup. I really don't know who's going to win. I would lean Philly, but man, I have a hard time just giving them a full confidence because I think that anything could happen this coming weekend.
I mean, I can't keep betting against Washington.
Mm.
I mean, 4 games into this year, I'm like, Jayden Daniels looks great. Let's wait until there's a little bit more tape. Oh, Jayden Daniels looks great. There's more tape on him, but he's still, he's going to face the Eagles again later in the season. How's he going to look? Oh, playoffs. Playoffs is a different speed. They're going to take away things you like. And every single step of the way, the guy keeps balling. So it's hard pressed to also go against a team that has momentum. When you're playing with against a team that has this kind of confidence, it can be hard to stop. But you're also running into just a real nasty blue collar team that's the Eagles, and they're going to physically beat you down. I mean, you look at that run that Jalen Hurts had, and they highlighted it. Jordan Mailata didn't even have anybody to block. You got a 350-pound man screaming down the field in front of Jalen Hurts, and he's got nobody to block, and that's kind of scary. And I'm curious to see what physicality Philadelphia decides to bring, and if they try and go for a little bit more finesse, knowing that they're going to have to score a little bit more.
One factor here, not only has, these are division rivals, Washington and Philly. They've played each other a lot over the years. They play each other twice a year, minimum every year. But on top of that, think about Dan Quinn. Remember, he just coached in Dallas for a long time. He's very familiar with Philly. He's been in the division against Philly for a long time. Different team, but he's played them twice a year for years now.
Very good point.
There's a lot of familiarity between these two teams on top of a coach who, just because he's a new coach doesn't mean he's new to the division. It's fascinating to me. I really think it's a coin toss between who wins here. And I think if anyone wins in a blowout, it probably is Philly, right? If Philly wins by 20, I won't be shocked. If Washington won by 20, I'd be like, what the hell happened to
That
Philly?
was,
But I
yeah,
expect a close game. I really think it's going to come down to the wire, and we're going to get treated with a really good one here this coming weekend.
yeah, and I think we're going to get treated to it because of the talent of Jayden Daniels. He is just such a special player to watch, and it's amazing to see him grow this season and continue to blossom. So it's going to be a blast.
How about the Lions, man? It's depressing to watch their season come to an end. It feels like monumental, massive missed opportunity. They're losing Ben Johnson. We could talk about that later in the show, but I don't think this was Ben Johnson not being focused. Like he wasn't the problem actually with this loss, in my opinion. We can debate that. I'm looking at your face. Sounds like we could debate that, but I thought Aaron Glenn had not his best performance as a defensive coordinator. I thought they had multiple turnovers. That Ben Johnson's not the guy dropping the football or throwing
Yep.
interceptions. I I don't know. I don't think they lost because of Ben Johnson, but it does mean he's now leaving to a division rival. You're not going to have him now, and it's just this whole season 2024. Like this was the year for the Lions to go get a Super Bowl. For them to lose immediately in their first playoff game is so like it's just a punch in the gut. It's like, man, this was not the ending I
Yeah.
wanted. All three NFC North teams are out of the playoffs in one game. Boom, boom, boom. First round exit. It's like, wow, that's sad.
It is sad, and as much as we've praised the Commanders, the Lions did shoot themselves in the foot quite a bit this
Mhm.
game.
Yeah.
They finally score their first touchdown, right? Their second drive. That's great. Your next possession, you fumble and you give them a TD after they've scored. And then you throw your pick six. And then you stop yourself from scoring at half by an interception. And then you get a 3-and-out and you score, right? At the beginning of the second half. And you're like, okay, great. They're getting their momentum back. First half was a fluke. And then you throw another pick and that leads to a touchdown. And once they had to start chasing, I just don't think that they were prepared to play that way. And I think that showed in Goff and his posture. And he probably got smoked. And I don't want to say the guy was concussed, but you get your bell rung like that. You start seeing the field a little bit differently. I can't help but think that that played a little bit of a role in some of his decision making. But yeah, at the end of the day, they gave the ball up 4 times. Goff also had a fumble. Like you're not going to win an NFL playoff game turning the ball over 4 times. Amon-Ra St. Brown played great. Jahmyr Gibbs is still so amazing receiving and rushing the football. He's an excellent talent. But yeah, if you give the ball away and you give the Commanders extra possessions, they're going to score. And then that's how you end up losing, by 2 scores.
Yeah, again, let's be very clear about it. Jared Goff, 4 turnovers on the day, 3 interceptions and a fumble. He can't do that, man. Like it's just
No.
not. But it's
You can
so
do it against the
disappointing.
Texans, who don't have a very strong offense, right? You remember that
Yeah.
game earlier
Uh-huh.
this year,
Yeah.
but the Texans couldn't score.
Yeah.
And that's why they were able to win the game. But Commanders were able to score.
Yeah. What's really sad is I thought Jahmyr Gibbs had a hell of a game. The running back in Detroit,
He did.
14 carries, 105 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had this awesome, powerful run for a touchdown. It's like, man, like what a waste of the
105 yards
whole.
on 14 carries is crazy, by the way.
Yeah. No, it really is. I mean, this was what'd they go 15-2 this year in Detroit? Is that the final
Yeah, 15
like
and 2
and then out
ended up being 15. Yeah.
just out one game, not even nothing. It's like, wow, I did not expect that to end that way. I just like I really thought we were gonna get I wanted a great game between I thought Philly and Detroit would have been a really fun, interesting matchup, and we'll never know. It's really sad to me.
Yeah, it would have been an amazing matchup, but yeah, we're not going to get it.
How about another surprise? So Detroit, leaving the playoffs early really caught me off guard. I just was disappointed and surprised and impressed by Washington, but I had a blast watching Buffalo and Baltimore play. I guess Sunday night,
Yeah.
and this was the game of the weekend. We all saw that coming. That's the reason it was put in the slot it was on Sunday Night Football. But it was all the Ravens fell short. Buffalo beat the Ravens 27-25 in Buffalo. Fun game. I think you and I were texting about it. There's blame all around in Baltimore. What do you make of that Baltimore Ravens loss this past weekend?
Given those conditions, I need Derrick Henry to have more than 16 carries. I think that to me sticks out the most. And that's what I talked about last week. This game wasn't going to be Josh Allen versus Lamar Jackson. And honestly, it really wasn't. Did 2 of those guys make some great plays for their teams? Yes, absolutely. But they also weren't the highlight of their teams by any means. And I just, the Ravens really just kind of gave this game away. It was another situation where the Bills didn't turn the ball over, but the Ravens did multiple times, and that ends up being the difference in those extra possessions. And then, when it mattered most, they went down there and scored. That was incredibly impressive. And then you miss a 2-point conversion, and it's just a dagger in the heart. To me, I look at this, and I don't want to say. I really felt like the Ravens were a better team and played better in general than the Bills did. But they turned the ball over, and that was the ultimate difference.
What stands out to me is Mark Andrews, man. I don't want to hate on the guy too much, but
Oof.
he had two like brutal drops. He had a drop early in the game over the middle that it sets up at least a touchdown. If not, he gets in the end zone himself. But they're on like the 5 yard line if he catches that and runs after the catch. He also drops the 2 point conversion. They put there this great touchdown drive. It's a minute 33 left. Now, that's a long time. They tie the game 27-27, give the ball back to Josh Allen with a minute 33 left. They're not guaranteed to win that football game anyway, or even get to overtime because maybe
Right.
Josh puts together a drive there. But game tying throw, corner of the end zone, he's sliding. Lamar put it to the right shoulder. He throws it inside to pull the receiver back towards the pylon. Mark Andrews drops it. He also had a fumble. Mark Andrews is Isaiah Likely's kind of become the number one tight end in Baltimore, but Mark Andrews is the guy people are holding on to hope for and wanting him to have a great year this year. And it couldn't have ended any worse for Mark Andrews than this game in Buffalo. It's brutal to watch.
Yeah, that's going to leave a sour taste in everybody's mouth for a long time, knowing how close they were to, just tying the game. Let's be clear, there was still time. But again, I would have just loved to have seen Derrick Henry get the ball more. I know that Justice Hill, he was incredibly efficient. I think he had over 50 yards rushing. But again, I'm just giving that ball to Derrick Henry. And he did start to churn later in that fourth quarter. He was starting to get more chunk plays. And to me, that just has to start sooner. And as much as I love that change of pace of Justice Hill, and right, maybe the turnovers took away some of those carries that Derrick Henry would have had. But he's got to have 20 plus in a situation where the snow's coming down. You don't want to have to rely on the passing game to win. I just needed to see more Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, their turnovers led to a 21-10 deficit at halftime. They had two turnovers in the first half for Baltimore, and then that late fumble. But I just there is nothing like being in person for an NFL playoff game. The energy, the sound, the crowd, it's incredible. And Game Time can help you get NFL playoff tickets. Here is what Game Time does for you. The Game Time Picks feature allows for curation that makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and other events. They have all-in pricing, which is a feature that makes sure there are no surprise fees at checkout. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy your tickets, and Game Time has a lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And Game Time has ticket coverage where your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. I'm so disappointed in the Ravens, man. I will say the game was fun. Like, I'm glad we got everything I wanted from this game. I wasn't like disappointed in the game. I'm disappointed in the way the Ravens lost, really. Like, if the Ravens play their best and they lose, I can handle that. It's tough to watch such a capable football team have three massive turnovers and missed opportunities and drops and fumbles and interceptions. They go like, man, like, y'all are just missing opportunities left and right. And again, it's hard to watch a capable football team lose that way and not feel dissatisfied.
Yeah, and I think that that's what we've seen for the past couple of years. It's never that the Ravens get massively outperformed. They just kind of beat themselves in these big games. And that's what we've seen. And to your point now, seeing it for a number of years in a row, disappointing is really the only way to describe it. And were they missing Zay Flowers? Yes, maybe that could have changed, how they moved the ball offensively. But at the end of the day, man, it was self-inflicted wounds that did a serious amount of damage.
How about Kansas City and Houston? Kansas City beat Houston 23-14.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of conversation about the refs. I don't know if I want to read the write-ins or not. If you go to our Patreon, we got Jason, our Lord Tom Cruise 11, Gabriel. A lot of conversations about the refs. I think let's read one. It's a long one. I'll read it from Jason though.
Let's hear it, Jason.
Zach, man, what did you think about the unnecessary roughness calls in the Texans-Chiefs game? Now, I'm a biased Texans fan, so he acknowledges he's a little skewed one direction.
Right.
And I recognize that they shot themselves in the foot enough with special teams miscues and not being able to bottle up Travis Kelce. But there's no doubt that the penalties, especially the unnecessary roughness calls on Mahomes, contributed heavily to the Texans' loss. I'm not trying to blame the refs here. I'm actually kind of impressed by Mahomes. He has clearly cracked the formula for drawing flags. On the hit by Will Anderson Jr., he makes sure to whip his head back to make it look like a hit to the head. Later on a scramble, he makes sure to slide as late as possible so he can always add on penalty yardage. On another scramble, he slows down as he runs out of bounds, either trying to sneakily get a few extra yards, knowing that the defensive players can't hit him, or trying to bait a late hit out of bounds. If I was an NFL coach, wishful thinking, I would be teaching quarterbacks to start flopping and trying to draw penalties. It clearly works, not only for Mahomes, but Josh Allen too. It's too exploitable. I don't know. What do you think? I think, Gabe wrote in about this too. Shout out to them. I don't want to, I think it plays a role for sure. And does Mahomes get a lot of penalties? Yes. I also think he's the most protected quarterback in football for a reason. He's the face of the league. And also, like, I think what's interesting about this write-in from Jason is he points out like the little things that Mahomes does to draw flags, and I think that's really good gamesmanship, honestly. Sliding late, doing little things here, tipping your head back. Dude, I was such a dirty basketball player, for example. I did every little thing I could to get an edge. Um, I don't I still don't know that this was a difference in the game. Like, to recognize the special teams miscues, to not stop Travis Kelce, the failures on the offensive side of the football for Houston. I just don't agree that this was a difference in the game. What do you make of this whole conversation, Nathan? What do you think of the penalty talk?
It's, to me, it's ridiculous, right? Jason pointed out the fact that the Texans really shot themselves in the foot, unable to finish drives, miscues on special teams that ends up costing them the game. The penalty where Will Anderson Jr. hits Mahomes, his helmet hits under his face mask, right? It wasn't incredibly forcible, but from behind, it's not like Mahomes can like go like this and keep his neck forward. If that helmet is coming in, your head is going to go back. He didn't flick it back, and you can tell because at one angle it looks really bad, and then at the other angle it doesn't look as bad. But the ref who threw the flag is the ref who's behind, and all he sees is Will Anderson's helmet go right under the chin and then a neck go backwards. That's going to be a flag. On the second one, did Mahomes get down late? Yes. And I don't think he was trying to slide as in a traditional slide. I think he was just trying to, oh crap, I'm about to get absolutely smacked and like duck and roll, right? Both of those players launched with helmets down and went into pat. Okay. That is targeting, and that's going to be a penalty more often than not, especially on a quarterback. If that's a running back, maybe you get away with that. But as a quarterback, even though they are established as a runner, it's still likely going to be a call. And again, both players honestly could have done damage to themselves, dropping their helmet and diving in. Both players launched. So that's going to be roughing as well. The other ones are questionable. There's holding on every play, blah, blah, blah. But to say that this was, done by the refs, or this whole narrative that the Kansas City Chiefs are favored by the refs, we've seen them now for 3 straight years win low scoring games, grinding it out, one possession, making one more play than the other team. It's not a coincidence, and it's not the refs at this point. They are just very good at what they do.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
end my rant there.
Well, I want you to keep ranting, actually, because we had a conversation before recording about this game. Why do you think Houston lost this football game?
It was their inability to finish drives. CJ Stroud. Also, let's look at the fact that their offensive line gave up 9 sacks. That's going to be a problem. And I'd actually like to credit CJ Stroud for hanging tough in the pocket the way he did, doing his best to try and win the game. Granted, it didn't reflect with touchdown passes. He was still 19 for 28, 245 yards. It's not like he had a poor performance, but when your quarterback is under pressure over 50% of the time, I think the number might have been close to 56 or 57%, that's going to be hard for your offense to get to move the football. Their offensive line was healthy at the time. There was no excuse. George Mixon was doing, or not George Mixon, I'm sorry.
Joe Mixon.
Joe Mixon. I was thinking of George Karlaftis. Joe Mixon was doing his thing in the ground game. They just did not finish drives. And there weren't penalties on their drives that, bumped them out of field goal range or took away these massive plays. They just didn't finish drives.
Yeah. It's that simple to me. I also I don't want to poo-poo the commenter here, Jason. But yeah, I think you're biased, man. I think you're a Houston Texans fan who's disappointed and in pain. I understand that. I don't. This narrative.
You let Travis have 117 yards. Come on. Dude's wide open all of the time.
Well, there's this narrative though that just continues every week since September that the refs are in love with Kansas City, and I just don't. Actually, it's honestly, it's to the point. It reminds me of New England back in the day when people, the more dominant you are for the longer period of time, the longer you're dominant, people are going to start A, getting sick of you, and B, start talking about and discrediting the ways you're winning. And I think that's starting to happen in Kansas City because this is a great football team that's every week found a way to win in different ways. And I just think it's really frustrating for people to. I'm not a Kansas City Chiefs fan. I don't care. But it's weird that people don't give credit when there's obvious credit deserved by the Chiefs organization this year for putting together a great season, finding ways to win every week, winning in different ways week to week. And I'm really tired of everyone always blaming the refs for them winning and not crediting that. No, it's a good football team that does it in a different way constantly.
Yeah, and if you get up on the mic and say, "Man, we knew it was going to be, us against them and us against the refs," dude, stop. You're having that from the top down, from your head coach, your quarterback, your offense, your defense. That's a problem. If you're going into that game thinking, "All right, they're going to have a leg up on the refs," the only thing you're going to have a leg up on is because Pat is a legacy QB, right? He's the face of this league. He's the only guy that's going to get the call. And so what you tell your guys, hey, when Pat gets rid of the ball, don't hit him, right? Don't push him. The two guys, when they were chasing Pat out to the sideline and he kind of tried to slow down, no flag was thrown there because they said, hey, we're going to keep our hands off. That's high IQ football. You push him, you push Josh Allen, you push Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. If you extend those arms, though, that was going to be a penalty. So you know what it takes. So you have to be cerebral the entire game. That's all.
Yeah. I don't have much to say about this game that a better team won. It's not the Houston Texans at their best. They're missing receivers. They're not at full strength. They got injuries everywhere. I don't know, man. I'd love to see this game rewound at some point with Houston operating at full capacity. But I never gave them a shot. I wasn't disappointed or surprised by the outcome. It's like, yeah, Houston made a playoff game. Good for them. They won a playoff game, even better. But they're not going to beat Kansas City. I never considered that a possibility for this team.
And they even spotted you 2 points late in the game.
Yeah.
Which was hilarious, by the way. Just running out the back of the end zone.
What I will say, we're on refs, and I forgot to say this earlier. Watching the Ravens-Bills game, I thought the refs kind of let them play a couple times in that Ravens-Bills game in Buffalo where it got chippy. They were pushing. There was even a play where the ref got like thrown to the ground by a player. No flag was thrown. And I was like, surely that's a flag. And it wasn't.
And it wasn't.
Or there was a time, I think it was Josh Allen running out of bounds. It was Josh Lamar. I can't remember who it was. One of the quarterbacks running out of bounds. The hit started before he was out of bounds, and then the tackle.
That was Lamar. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember because who's the. Oh, there's an offensive lineman with a funny name. He got all mad and pushed people. So, like, it's a potential late hit on Lamar. Yeah, then Rosenbaum comes and pushes another player. A lot of shoving. Slightly late hit. A lot of pushing and shoving. No penalty for anyone. Let him play. I thought that game in particular in Buffalo had a lot of moments where, like, the ref was reserved, didn't throw a flag. They let him be chippy. It made the game better. I really appreciated that about that Buffalo Bills game, especially. That was the one moment I saw this week. I was like, yo, the refs are just letting a little more happen, and that's for the better of the game, in my opinion.
I agree. But on that one for Lamar, did the tackle technically start before he got out of bounds? Yes. But the tackle got re-engaged after Lamar was out of bounds. That was not safe. To me, that one should have been called.
Well, I think you could have easily thrown a flag, and no one would have.
No one would have argued that one.
Yeah, Bills fans would have, because you always argue in favor of your team, right? And sure. I'm sure Ravens fans were screaming at the TV, what the heck? But I was kind of like, hey, because again, notice though, Rosenbaum, the lineman, then does some extracurricular moves too. And they're like, hey, we're not going to throw a flag either way here. It's not a late hit.
They let it all go.
We're going to let them shove each other. Like, it's okay. And I appreciated how often there was consistency from both the refs letting both sides have a little bit of extracurricular activity. I just thought that was very fair, and I really appreciated it.
Okay, I wanted to double check. We're combining two of their last names. So there's Tyler Linderbaum, and then there's Roger Rosengarten. So we were like Rosenbaum, but it's
That's funny.
Rosengarten, I believe.
Linderbaum, I think, is who was pushing in that
He was
moment.
one of the guys. But number one, love that you're sticking up for your quarterback. But I think you're also right about that game. They let the guys play, and I think that football is better played with on that edge of aggression. So keeping it there for that playoff game, it honestly felt like an AFC North matchup. I loved it.
Yeah. Well, and I think generally, like, this is maybe how we can swing it back around to that Texans game. Generally, I'm a fan of letting unless it's egregious in a playoff game, you let people play a little more. You let people get chippy. You let people. I thought some of the best refereeing I've seen all year went down in Buffalo this past weekend. You go back and watch that game. There's a lot of pushing after the play. There's a lot of, again, a ref literally got thrown to the ground and no flag was thrown. I was so impressed. I was like, hey, they're letting them play. Because what you don't want as a ref is to have your ego and your opinion interjected into this great football game. Two teams duking it out. The Ravens lost because they had fumbles and turnovers and got out of their own way. The Ravens did not lose because of penalties thrown against them by a favoritism or home Buffalo Bills referee crew. And I thought that was cool. Like, hey, there's no narrative in Buffalo that the Ravens lost because the refs screwed them over. They lost because it was their fault. And that's because there were times where the refs kept their flag in their pocket and didn't interject their opinion into the football game.
Yeah.
That's outstanding to me.
Yep, I agree there. I completely glossed over this. Who was the guy for the Texans that shoved the living daylights out of the special teams coach? We glanced over that.
Oh.
What is there any more context? Can anybody comment with some more context on what happened, why it happened, and why he just went in two hands, just boom, shoved his offensive coordinator, or not his offensive coordinator, his special teams coordinator? I would love to know what happened and what the fallout has been from that.
Yeah, Chris Boyd shoved the special teams coach Frank Ross after the opening kickoff on Saturday. D'Amico Ryans has come to the defense of Chris Boyd, saying it wasn't anything bad. It sounds like he got excited. Maybe he got overly excited. I'll be honest, man. I'm not sure what to make of this. Was he mad? Was it overexcitement? I think some of it was
I'm
emotion.
genuinely so curious.
But even if it was not, it looked to me like a player getting really fired up. And like, you know how it is when you play football. Like you're this crazy beast on the field. Then you got to go to the sideline to be a normal person. You're like,
Start
hey,
shoving people.
I'm still a jacked up, excited guy, right? Like you know what I mean? And it's hard to turn that off. So I think you get excited. But even if I'm wrong and say he was really trying to cause a problem for his coach, they're never going to admit it. Like you're never going to hear the truth about this incident if it was a bad thing. If it was a player intentionally trying to hurt a coach, they're never going to admit that or say that publicly. But I don't think that's what it was. Let's be very clear. We're never going to get if there was anything bad about it, we're never going to find out because the Texans would never admit to like a coach being shoved maliciously by a player. They're just not going to do that. They're not going to admit that.
Yeah, that's fair. But man, what a trip that was watching that.
Let's see. I'm watching the video right now.
Like just lays into him with two. And honestly, his special teams coach kind of had some frame to him. You know what I mean?
I'm watching it.
He kind of ate that.
It looks like it. Yeah. Also, you read Twitter, right? And you hear that it's a crazy moment, and it's a guy excited. You see that, coach? Hell yeah! Like I don't see anything malicious there. I don't know. It's a lot of. I heard a lot about this play, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, I don't think there's anything. There's literally nothing. Did no one play football growing up? Does no one no one remember how emotionally charged you get playing football? Like, come on now, guys, relax.
It is emotionally charged. That's funny.
Let's talk about college football because we did just have literally tonight the national title. Ohio State beat Notre Dame. Oh man, let me find it. What was the final score? Ohio State beat Notre Dame 34-23. It was closer than that till about the final minute when Ohio State got a field goal with 23 seconds left.
Yeah.
Ohio State led at one point 28-7. So it's honestly closer than the final score would show. Notre Dame tried to kind of come back at the end. What'd you make of this game? I thought, first of all, I'll just say I thought a really impressive season by Notre Dame, winning up front, winning in the trenches. Linemen won games for them a lot this year. Ultimately, they ran into a buzzsaw Ohio State. What'd you make of this game?
As soon as they said our game plan is to run the ball with Riley Leonard, I knew this game was over. They said Riley Leonard is not capable of throwing us to a victory here. We
Huh.
have to try and use him in other ways, using his legs, which he's known for, to win this game. And that just wasn't going to do it. As soon as Ohio State got comfortable, settled down, it was smooth sailing. And I know, again, the score may or may not have been close, but that this was the Ohio State team that we thought we were going to see the entire year. I think we underestimated how much newness was on that team, between the quarterback, between coaches and coordinators, other new players on the roster. It just took them time to come together. And that loss to Michigan, I think, brought everybody together, right? They said, hey, we're supposed to be this great team. Who have we been? And I think that flipped a switch inside that team, and they just went on an absolute tear. So much talent, top to bottom. Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, Brandon Ennis, Emeka Egbuka, like so much talent defensively. Jack Sawyer, Caleb Downs, probably my favorite safety in college football. They were just the best team. And not only were they the best collection of players, they found out how to be that team. And that's why they ended up dominating and really running through everybody for the college football playoff.
I'm just glad the Will Howard move ultimately ended up working out for them pretty well. And I want to also protect you from some angry commenters, right? Riley Leonard ended the day 22 for 31, had 255 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. He had more yards and completions than Will Howard had. Will Howard was 17 for 21, 231 yards, also 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, but when you're throwing and you're trailing late, there's a lot of empty yards
Yeah,
there.
I think it's fair.
We all watched the game. It's not
The
like
first half.
Riley Leonard. Yeah, it's not like Riley Leonard played horribly. But again, there was a concerted effort from the jump that the game plan isn't going to be have Riley Leonard air out the football. They started to have to air out because of the situation that was put in front of them.
Oh, I agree with you. I just want to make sure we covered that. Hey, he didn't have like a terrible game on
Okay,
paper.
that's fair.
I think you're right. The first half, their game plan was different than when they're in comeback mode trying to survive. I remember saying at one point, hey, if they don't win a national title because they didn't bring in Cameron Ward to Ohio State because they didn't want to pay him that contract, it's a problem. Turns out it didn't matter. They won a national title with Will Howard. And credit to Will Howard, man. You're right. From about that Michigan game on, he had an incredible end of the year. He played great down the stretch in meaningful moments. Will Howard, the Ohio State transfer quarterback out of Kansas State, fantastic. I thought the best play of the game actually was, that final drive. They have a field goal drive to ice the game. It's a 1-score game. 3rd and 11. He throws a dime down the right sideline to Jeremiah Smith, and you're like, there it is. The game over right there. What a game for Marcus Smith too. Marcus Smith, former Ohio State linebacker, like linebacker or safety. I want to get that right. Linebacker, I believe, right? Marcus Freeman.
I'm not going to have that answer for you.
Marcus Freeman. He played at Ohio State. But imagine playing your former college football team. He was a linebacker. He was a linebacker at Ohio State, which is crazy and hilarious and interesting to play your former team in a national title game. What's more funny though, watching Notre Dame play in a national title, I thought a lot about Brian Kelly, the LSU head coach, who he once took Notre Dame to a national title. They got whooped by Alabama. And I think it's really interesting to see a coach leave Notre Dame because you can't win a national title at Notre Dame, and then very quickly see that his successor take that same football team to a national title. They didn't win once again, but it's the second time I've seen Notre Dame lose a national title in the last 15 years, and that's surprising and interesting to me. It says a lot about a coach who didn't want to take that on and thought, I can never do that here. I'm going to LSU just to have his replacement do better than him.
Yeah.
What do you make of this loss?
Well, just want to point out Brian Kelly a little bit more. And I know people are starting to talk about it now that Jayden Daniels is truly ascending. Jayden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr. I know their offense wasn't the problem at LSU 2 years ago, but the defense was completely inept. And I think that shows, like Brian Kelly, when he was at Notre Dame did have a good defense, and that was because of Marcus Freeman. So for Marcus Freeman to be able to show aptitude on both sides of the football, granted the offense wasn't stellar, I think is incredibly impressive. But yeah, what a great season. I called them frauds when they lost to, I think it was like Northern Illinois or something of the other earlier this year. Impressive for them to rebound, find their identity, churn out games and then ultimately end up in the national title. Very impressive.
Yeah. I It wasn't a rock. It was kind of a rocky road for Ohio State to get to this point. I thought we identified early on, back even like in August, hey, this is a loaded football team.
Yeah.
It took them a while. They lose to Oregon was pretty disruptive. The losses they had, they lost to Michigan. Like it wasn't always pretty, but they found a way in the end to become the best team in college football. I wonder what the ratings are going to be because this is kind of a regional. There's no Southeastern Conference football team here. There's no one from the South, represented. It's Ohio versus Indiana, which are two, neighboring states in the Midwest. Like, I wonder if this was a national title game that got a lower draw. Like, did fewer people watch this national title than in years past? I wonder if that's something that we'll see. And we even saw the College Football Playoff Committee acknowledge they're open to making changes to the structure of the playoff next year in 2025.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what those numbers look like. I know that I was tuned in just because I wanted to be. I wanted to make sure that the Ducks lost to the national champion, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know personally a lot of people that were like, I need to sit down and watch this tonight.
Yeah.
A few bars that I walk by my place, which are typically kind of full on game days and game nights, just looked like a normal, Monday evening bar. And, it's MLK Day. People got other plans, inauguration. There was a lot of other things to compete with, on this particular day. So, yeah, we'll have to see what the numbers came out to be.
I forgot about the inauguration. Why would you ever schedule a football game on the same day as that? I never even considered that. Here's how I know it wasn't a huge draw, this game. Austin, friend of the show, been on a couple times, biggest sports nerd I know. I called him earlier today, or sorry, he called me. I was finishing up work and I was like, "What are you doing tonight?" He goes, "I'm driving around. I got a couple errands." He wasn't even planning to sit down and watch the game. I was like, "Hey, I'll check it on my phone while I'm doing stuff." I'm like, if even Austin, the biggest sports like nerd I know, isn't planning on sitting down to watch this game, the ratings are in trouble. Like that, he's
Gotta be in
my
trouble.
canary in the coal mine where I'm like, if he's not interested, there's a problem.
He's setting the standard for what's got the ratings. We should ask him how we should create a scale, the Austin scale. And it's how engaged were you in this game on a scale of 1 to 10. And based on his rating for how engaged he felt, I bet you we could get an accurate number for the ratings.
Dude, he's like the groundhog. I mean, I'm sure
Let's
there's
write the
a
algorithm.
correlation. I almost guarantee it. Like,
Let's write the algorithm.
um, let's shift gears now. We've covered this past weekend. It was interesting. It was disappointing. It was fun. This and that. I think it's noteworthy. We just covered a championship game like last, which is like, it really says a lot about our level of interest at minimum in the national title game. There was big breaking news today. Ben Johnson, the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator, has left Detroit to become the Chicago Bears head coach, which is fascinating. Moving in the division, going to play his former team twice a year, going to coach Caleb Williams, going to have a lot of great players. I think they got a loaded roster, to be honest, in Chicago. Now, we recently talked about it. We said we wanted Joe Brady. Even with the context of our last conversation, we're like, hey, is he going to work well with Caleb Williams? I'm still excited. I think it's a great hire that's hard to feel bad about. What do you make of Ben Johnson going to Chicago?
Yeah, I'm curious to see how he wants to build out this roster. That him and Ryan Poles are talking about how they want to fix and mend things, probably on the offensive and defensive side of the football. What are we doing at O-line? Is our O-line actually good, or was it poorly coached? Caleb, he's kind of more of an instinctive guy. How are we going to set him up for success to be a timing and rhythm kind of quarterback in this offense? Does Ben Johnson just create an entirely different offense that suits more to Caleb? What is the solution, or what is the solution going to be at running back? I know that they've got DeAndre Swift back there right now and Roshan Johnson. Are they going to seek out to get a new quarter or a new running back? I'm just so curious to see what the roster building looks like, because that's going to tell us a lot about how this team is going to look next year. They can only do and solve so much in one offseason, but you just got to think that if they can get that offensive line right and Caleb starts to feel comfortable in this timing and rhythm offense, that they're going to be scary, because then he's going to be able to do things that Jared Goff couldn't, extending plays. And I'm sure there might be a few more plays in the playbook that Ben Johnson hasn't been able to bring out because of that.
I don't question Caleb Williams' commitment. I think he's going to work his ass off to be prepared. He's really talented. And now he's got a coach who I think can do him justice. Say what you want. The answers they've got at skill positions in Chicago, DeAndre Swift, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Romo Dunze, Cole Kmet at tight end, they've got answers. You're going to put numbers in the box, we'll beat you over the top. You're going to back off, we're going to run the football. Like, there's no reason on paper this team can't succeed. And now they've got a coach that matches the quality of skill players they have. The offensive line has question marks. I think they can figure that out, but um, I would not be shocked at all if very quickly the Bears had success because the talent is there. They've just been waiting for the coach to get them where they need to. And frankly, they've been really. Shane Waldron as the offensive coordinator was baffling. He made me want to rip my hair out at times when it's like, you got all this talent at receiver and you're using them this way. It's just so
Yeah.
frustrating for me. And it's hard to think of them being. They're not going to be worse managed. I guess there's no way it's going to be a step down from the offensive side of the football at minimum. Um, I'm optimistic. I really am about the Bears hiring Ben Johnson. Honestly,
Yeah, I'm optimistic as well, just because of the brain that he has. We're going to have to see what kind of communicator he is without Dan Campbell, without that big boisterous energy.
mm-hmm.
How is he going to communicate and define the culture in Chicago? And how is he going to build his staff to do that? Because he's a younger guy, right? He's probably going to need to put a few veterans on his staff. Like, building his staff is not going to be easy. And I wonder who he wants to rely on and who he wants to bring in to help get the team where it needs to go. Because he's going to communicate one thing. Can he get his assistants to communicate the same thing? And then your captain's the same thing. So everything works top down.
I'd love to see him hire. Now, Robert Saleh might become a head coach again, but I would love to see Robert Saleh pair with Ben Johnson in in Chicago. Think of this division, though. It's fascinating.
Did you see what the Niners said about Robert Saleh?
What'd they say?
Apparently, they're prepared to make him the highest paid defensive coordinator of all time. They want him back that bad.
Dude, I don't blame him. He's a great coach. I mean, I really
Apologize, but keep going.
No. What's interesting is that division. I mean, I think the opportunity in Chicago is there. They got good players to work with, and that really matters. Like, it's a better opportunity than like the Raiders, for example, who might have offered Ben Johnson the world, but they've got nothing on that roster to work with, really.
Right.
However, you look around the rest of the division, Detroit, Green Bay, Minnesota, these are teams that won like 14 games this year apiece. The Bears have a tough task ahead of them. Like, they have a great group of guys on paper, but the division is even better around them. It's just a fascinating problem. Like, would you rather go to Jacksonville where you're competing against, I don't know, Tennessee, Indy, and Houston, or would you rather compete against Detroit, Green Bay, and Minnesota? Ben Johnson chose to go somewhere where he had a quarterback and some good skill position players to work with.
In division.
Man,
that's crazy.
Yeah, to play your former team twice, to play Green Bay and Minnesota. I mean, that's a tough order for a new coach. And it's just, I wonder if there's any complexity there with the in-division rivalries going on in the NFC North.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we saw Kyle Shanahan leave the Falcons, right? And all of a sudden, Dan Quinn and that offense did not look very good way back in the day. So if Ben Johnson leaves the Lions, how do the Lions look offensively? They still have obviously a lot of weapons, a lot of talent, and a lot of framework. Do they have somebody who comes in and runs Ben Johnson's offense? Do they bring in somebody new that changes things up? I mean, that's another big question, because they're going to have some massive change. And Aaron Glenn, he might be having a few head coaching offers. I don't think he'll end up getting it this cycle, especially after this most recent performance, but there's a chance he could. So there's going to be a lot of change for those two teams. Like Brian Flores, now we're looking at Minnesota. There's an opportunity he could leave. Again, a guy that I don't think gets a head coaching job this cycle, but there's a chance. Kevin O'Connell may or may not want to move on from Sam Darnold. You go to the Packers now. They, I think, overachieved this year, but Jordan Love, when he's not in play action, his completion percentage is sub 60. So they might not be as sure at quarterback as they thought they were. So there's still a lot of question marks in this NFC North division. And I think that's what gives Ben Johnson the edge. He gets to come in and kind of be the new guy on the block. Nobody's really going to be sure what to expect from him. And he'll have a long leash to get what he needs done.
Robert Saleh has a second interview scheduled with the Jaguars to become their head coach.
I wouldn't mind that.
You like that? Robert Saleh,
I know,
Trevor Lawrence.
I know I want Trevor to have an offensive guy, but I think that Saleh is a guy who learns from his mistakes, number one. There's some talent on that defense in Jacksonville already. I think that he can confidently get them playing in a top 10 to 15 type defense. And then if he hires the right guy, on that offensive coordinator side of things and just says, hey, like you go run the offense, you take care of Trevor, you make him happy, that could be an interesting fit.
Jeff Ulbrich went to Atlanta as the
Good for
defensive
them.
coordinator there.
I mean, Raheem Morris is already supposed to be the defensive play caller, right?
Yeah, it's just I like Jeff Ulbrich. I thought he worked well with Robert Saleh. I'm sad to see. I'm sad they won't work together anymore, honestly. But a promotion for him, or at least him surviving and finding an opportunity and taking it, because you can't really wait for Robert Saleh to find a job or not, and you got to kind of
Right.
take the opportunity you get. And then Lou Anarumo, coach we love, is now the Indianapolis Colts offensive coordinator, which is I maintain like it's a shame Matt Eberflus can't come back and be
You meant
the
lose the defensive coordinator, right?
oh yeah, did I say offense?
Yeah, I was like, are
he's
they pulling a
he's
Matt
Matt Patricia,
Patricia?
baby.
Dude, I thought for a second, I was like, the Jim Irsay would make a call and do some stupid shit like that.
No. So Lou Anarumo is going to work with
Shane Steichen, I like that.
Steichen. Looks like I think Dennis Allen is going to be. He's rumored to be the defensive coordinator in Chicago, which I actually like. Dennis Allen's a
I
capable
like
coach,
that.
not a head coach, but a good defensive coordinator for sure. It's getting interesting. I don't know. I guess the big question is, what the hell are the Raiders going to do? I guess nothing. They've stuck with. I think currently they're keeping Antonio Pierce, right? Is that the?
No, he got fired.
So what are they going to do? They don't have a plan at all to bring in a head coach. It seems like, although I don't know, does anyone want that job?
They
The
were
Raiders
saying,
job?
I mean, right before Ben Johnson, signed with the Bears, I heard a lot about Ben Johnson going to the Raiders.
He doesn't want that.
So
No one wants that job. I really
no.
don't think. I mean,
So I'm not, yeah, I really don't know what their plan is. I'm not sure if they're trying to still feel things out with maybe Coach Prime or something like that. No idea what their plan is. But classic Raiders to just fire their head coach again without really having a plan.
they're the 6th pick. They don't have a quarterback in striking distance right now. They got to trade up with Cleveland. And I think if you trade up with Cleveland, you almost want to draft a quarterback, then get a coach, because the quarterback might finally attract someone to that job. It's an insane
Right.
thought, but like, I don't know what the hell you do with the Raiders, man.
Could you imagine going into an NFL draft without having a head coach?
It's the Raiders, man. I
Like,
can see it. I'd be
that'd be wild.
surprised, but I don't know, man. Let's end today with 2 questions. We got questions on Patreon. Kenny writes in, says, Zach, I'm entering my name into the NFL transfer portal. My heart aches with the news of Ben Johnson going to Chicago. I've been loyal to the Raiders ever since I've been into football, and they have given me nothing but pain. Man, I think it's a perfect segue. What do the Raiders do? I just feel bad. Like I don't have anything. I don't have a plan. I don't have any cool strategy. I think the Raiders are just screwed, man. They're in a really bad spot. I don't have a lot of hope for them. I don't know what you do. What do you make of the Raiders right now?
Yeah, you got an owner who keeps, knocking over the house of cards before they even get built. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're like setting up the dominoes, or like, yeah, you're setting up, those little things that you can like run through your house. You set up all this crazy stuff to happen. You drop a marble, and then it hits a pan, and then a pan hits a broom. You get a coach like kind of putting all this stuff together, and then Mark Davis just comes in, smashes the shit, and says, "All right, we're starting over." And nobody can get any sort of solid ground or footing, or he gives the wrong guys too much leeway and too much footing. And then you just end up back at square one. And I think that much like we've seen with the Commanders over a number of years, Colts are seeing it now, the Panthers. Bad ownership yields bad results. When you have people getting in the way of football, people doing football stuff, it can be very, very difficult. Now, even the Cowboys. And you hurt your team's potential momentum when you do that. Now, I don't think the Raiders had any momentum this year, let's be clear, but they also didn't have a quarterback. They knew that this year they were going to go into it without a quarterback and start looking at and planning for next year. And then Antonio Pierce didn't even get a chance to see that out. The guys in the locker room loved him. There was no question about it, but you just blew everything up before you could even lay a foundation. And if you keep doing that, you're never going to get anywhere.
I wouldn't fire Antonio Pierce without a plan to replace him. Like, I don't think he's that bad. And I think the problem with firing Antonio Pierce is if you want to bring in a new coach, you're going to have to hire someone like him anyway, someone who you're not super stoked about long term. So it's like,
Right.
what did we do this for? I don't know, man. That's bad. Sid writes in. Sid says 9-32. Don't know why, but he said 9-32. He says venting here. You couldn't have scripted a worse year for the Giants. Screwed ourselves out of the first overall pick. Snaquan, Bitchley, and the Eagles made it to the NFC Championship game with the
Hater.
commies and the quarterback we would have had if we tanked properly last year. And on top of it, I planned a trip to Phoenix to watch the Super Bowl with a group of friends who all are Eagles fans, and I hate seeing them happy in sports. If this was the deal with the devil we made for beating Tom Brady twice, I'd still gladly pay it, but it's not looking like a good deal as the years go on. What do you make of the Giants? I think who's worse to be a fan of, the Raiders or the Giants right now?
Probably the Raiders at this exact moment.
Wow.
Honestly, if I'm the Giants, listen, the Eagles are Saquon away from being a 500 team. Say what you want. That's a fact. Without Saquon Barkley, that team might have been 500 this year. The way Jalen Hurts has thrown the football and the issues that they've had getting the offensive going. Without Saquon, that team is like 500. If the Giants would have just paid him, Daniel Jones now has an outlet, a guy that you can run the offense through. You've still got Malik Neighbors. And now this year, maybe you got a wild card spot. Maybe you just missed the playoffs, but you feel positive about the momentum. And then now you go get a different quarterback, right? You take like a Jackson Dart later in a different round, or you just go for a true bridge guy. You get Daniel Jones out of the building still, but
Sam
your
Darnold.
defense, yeah, you could get somebody, right? But the point is if they would have kept Saquon, their offense would have looked so much better this year.
Mm-hmm.
And then going into next year, right now you've got more options again after you've moved off Daniel Jones, and they were. I don't know if that would have saved absolutely everything, but their defense is still solid, right? They've got a number of players on that defense who can be effective. Offensively, we just talked about the weapons, and then you have another cycle, get a few more, and this team could have been turned around. But I think that the Giants went in the complete opposite direction. Now, with all that said, I don't think the Giants are too far away. Joe Shane probably needs to be really aggressive, and Daboll needs to make sure that he has a strong defensive coordinator.
Yeah. I mean, I just think the Giants feel like they're safe. They believe they're the third pick. They're going to get a quarterback, whether that's Shedeur Sanders or Cameron Ward. I really think someone's going to leapfrog them and trade with the Cleveland Browns, honestly.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm the Raiders, I'm getting on the phone and doing whatever it takes to trade up. And I don't know why the Giants seem to have this, whether it's their fan base. I don't know if the Giants actually feel this way, but I assume they do because I've watched them on Hard Knocks and seen how the attitudes are in that building. I think they think they're safe. I think they think they're guaranteed to get a quarterback if they just stay where they are.
Yeah.
I would absolutely love to watch the Raiders trade up, leapfrog them, and take Shedeur Sanders or take whatever player they're sitting there thinking they're going to get. It would be really fun for me. Not even because I think it's going to work for the Raiders, just I think it would really screw the Giants out of the person they think they're going to be able to draft.
Yeah.
And I think they really think they're going to have either Shedeur or Cam Ward and not even have to do anything. And I just don't think that's a safe given, decision for them personally.
Have you done a QB breakdown to talk about who you'd prefer between Shedeur and Cam? Have you thought about that? Like which quarterback you would rather draft?
I would draft. Who do you think I would rather draft?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking you.
Cameron Ward by a mile. Like not even. And I would actually, because I'm going to say the same thing Marcus has. I would refer people go to Marcus Whitman's video. He's that franchise guy in YouTube. He made a video. I want to find the title. It's called something to the effect of like, I guess this is a top 5 pick. Let's find it. That franchise guy. And I watched about half of it at work, and then I watched the other half at home. He says this is, and then quotes, apparently a top 5 pick. Marcus breaks down Shedeur Sanders, talks about his arm strength, talks about, I don't know if he talks about the off the field stuff, but I just not that impressed at all with Shedeur Sanders. I don't feel really confident he's a franchise quarterback. He's got an average arm. He's got some really bad interceptions. I'm unimpressed, and I kind of aligned with Marcus there that we'll see what happens. But I'm not at all into the idea of drafting him. I would not draft Shedeur Sanders currently. I wouldn't feel comfortable giving him the money and giving him the responsibility. To me, actually, in interviewing Jack Easterby, one of the things we talked about, Actually, this was after the interview. So he talked about the quarterback he had in Houston. I'm going to be classy and not say that guy's name. That quarterback in Houston didn't seem to understand that you're a mayor of your town. If you're a quarterback in an
Mm,
NFL city, the responsibility of that follows you. You can't be owing people money. You can't be having all kinds of crazy wild nights with girls. You gotta be a responsible dude that understands the weight of that. I don't know if Shitter Sanders understands that. I see a lot of the watch crap and a lot of smack talk and a lot of flashy crap, and I think it's
mm.
really good for promotion and social media. I don't really want that from my quarterback personally.
Red flag for you. What about,
Definitely.
does anything about Cam Ward scare you?
Nothing. I love the guy. I would work with him in a heartbeat. I think he's more responsible and better at the line of scrimmage than anyone gives him credit for, actually. The way he learned that system, the audibles he made early on in the year at Miami. As a coach, man, I would be all in. I would love to work with him. And I expect Tennessee to draft Cameron Ward with the number one overall pick. And if they don't, I would be shocked and surprised personally.
Okay.
That's all I got, man. Anything else you want to talk about today?
Man, I got to play golf today. I haven't
Really?
golfed in a while. If you guys don't know this, I
Oh,
love
it
to
was
get
a
out there.
holiday. I worked today. I
Yeah.
forgot. Yeah.
Yeah, so I got to get out there and swing it with a couple of good buddies. We got out, played a morning tee time. God, it's so great when you just get back to the hobbies you love. So
Mm.
my thing is make sure you guys give some time for yourselves. Zach and I are not great examples, Zach especially, of leaving time for yourself to do things that nourish you, but save time for yourself to do the things that you love, whether that's big hobbies, little hobbies, going on dates, going on walks, whatever it is, just make sure you give yourself that time to do that. And sometimes like do it alone. Just love spending time with yourself and with you. I, that's all. I'll leave you guys with that.
Yeah. No, I did something that'll be proud of me this past weekend. I drove to Salem. Our install manager,
Sounds
Luis,
boring already.
he's it was a great time. Luis is the most capable construction person I've ever met in my entire life. I went to his house for dinner, had some traditional El Salvadorian food. It was really fun and
Oh, that
played
sounds fire.
pool and had too many drinks. It was a good time. And then last night, the other Nathan in my life who went to high school with you came over to
Yep.
my house for dinner. So I had quite a social weekend actually.
Fun.
I'm exhausted now, but it was fun.
Yeah.
It's funny. I don't know if
Awesome.
you can relate to this, but I feel like I've got energy for like every 2 weeks doing something social. But the truth
Yeah.
is, whenever I go out for dinner or do something, some kind of social event, it cuts into my plan for myself, whether it's I want to play Switch or I want to have a night inside or want to go to the gym. And
Yeah.
I've got a really tight schedule anyway that I don't really leave enough room to like do social events. It's a lot for me. I feel overwhelmed and always like, dang it, I'm missing out on things I really want to do because I was getting dinner with someone and I'm just not good at taking time socially, to be honest.
Yeah. I hear you on that. It's hard. It's hard, but we got to make sure we do it.
Yeah, man, that's all I got. I love you. Thanks for your time and good job tonight.
Love you, brother.
Bum, bam, we are done.